Hello and welcome to Big Talk, live from the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Adikan Michael. A whole lots of concern, and the big question on the lips of many Nigerians are, how is Nigeria faring where we are today as a nation? Almost 2 years of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, there are a lot of assessments over the current state of the nation, the political development of this nation, the kind of conversation we are having. And the presidency recently also responded that the president has appointed more than 71 persons from the north, 63 persons from the south into, the affairs of the country. There was a recent debate over the perceived regional imbalance in the federal appointment, or how this government or President Bola Tinubu's administration is running the affairs of the country. But the presidency has tried to number them down and trying to defend the appointment of the president. Said this is just 2 years, 2 more years to come. It seems other regions will be well captured. That has not really also been a problem of many persons. The economy, the cost of living in the country, the situation, how this government is managing the policies, the affairs of the nation, our democracy. A lot of persons said, is this really threatened with the actions and inactions of government? Where are we as a country? And what are the kind of conversation opposition are really having? And of course, we'll be doing all of that review tonight on the program. I have a National Secretary of African Action Congress, Ina Okopiagu, is my guest again on the show. Thanks so much. You don't like, answering honorable, but by virtue of being in a political party, they said all politicians are the same, but probably ANC are not the same. Let me start with the ongoing merger. There are a lot of people saying political opposition have to come together to merge. Your former presidential candidate said, we are not merging with them. I don't know if that is the stand of the party, because some people said you need to merge together for you to unseat the incumbent, if that is possible.
Mike, thank you very much again. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure being here. And our country is going through a lot. And if you juxtapose the time before Buhari came into power to this time, I don't think you can tell the difference, except that the person in the State House, their names are different, And after Jonathan, recall that it was a coalition that brought President Buhari to power, right? And that, I think, they did at the time to unseat the Jonathan's government, and they succeeded. But let's be honest with ourselves. When that coalition came to power, some of them were even, before they were formed, were part of the Jonathan's government. PDP, right? There were some new PDP and old PDP that left and then came together and formed the current APC. They took power. But if you look at the situation, when they came to power, there were hopes. People expected that the country was going to be better, especially given the perceived personality of the president at the time. But Mike, between me and you, that coalition, did it help Nigeria or bury us further into depression? I think it did bury us. We didn't fare better. So I don't think coalition is the problem. I don't even think that it is the solution.
Is it just a grabbing of power because of
that? Is it? Because when they come together to do this thing they are saying, and you can see they are beginning to assemble again like vultures waiting to devour something that was dying. Because Nigeria, as it is right now, as we stand, we're going through a lot, and if nothing is done about the situation we're in, I hope we have a country after 2027.
Because if that critics, even when we said they came together to grab power, some person who said they had a whole lot of things that they held on to criticizing former President Goodluck Jonathan.
Correct.
And if all of those persons are still coming again to say, look, Nigerians are not faring better. We've made our mistakes for even the last 8 years. We are disappointed with what we brought to Nigerians, like former governor of Kaduna State, National Rufai, saying that we have derailed completely from the vision of APC, and that is why he has taken a move to leave a party to another party. Don't you feel that there are some, sense of kind of having Nigeria at heart in that kind of move, or it's just a politicians again coming to play on the intelligence of Nigerians?
They are still trying trying to play on our intelligence. The person talking, the man you just mentioned, I mean, Erufai, how did he fare in Kaduna? Did he turn Kaduna into some beautiful place where you want to go to? Under his watch, you saw what was happening in southern Kaduna. Now, let us leave what the president did as President Buhari. Within his own space, how did he transform his space? Do you get what I mean? So if you want to tell us, point us to where you want to take us to, let us see what you did with the power that was given to you. He was a major stakeholder. Now, the reason I'm saying this, I am totally opposed to what they are doing. I think they don't care about us as a people. What they care about is themselves. Now, let me tell you something. A coalition may be required to remove the current president from power in 2027 through the ballot. But that coalition is not a coalition of vultures. It's not a coalition of buccaneers. It's not a coalition of power mongers. These politicians you see going about who do not mean well for this country. The coalition we need, I'm sure you must have heard my principal say it, is a coalition of the oppressed, a coalition of the hungry, a coalition of people who have lost their husbands during all this banditry and the kidnapping and the ravaging of our communities across the country. A coalition of hungry people. Students who went to school graduated without jobs. That is the coalition we should be building. A critical mass that will rouse these people from power. But any coalition of politicians, as they are continuing to do, we see them running to helter-skelter to other parties. Some of them tried to regroup yesterday somewhere in Transcorp. All that will come to naught. They cannot serve a people you don't care about. They can't serve. If they come to power, the same thing you're going to hear, except that one gentle old man came on air some days ago or so and then said something like his daughter also called the president and they gave her a job. His own came publicly. That is what will happen. You who fought and did all you did for them to come to power will be forgotten. Their children will get the jobs. But we should look forward to a new Nigeria where the people who will coalesce together are people who have gone through hell. People who currently cannot pay their house rent. People who can't pay their hospital bills. I don't know if you get what I mean. People are going through a lot. People have had to be retrenched from jobs. That is the coalition we should be looking at. A critical mass that can be achieved by calling our people together. That is what you need, my brother.
So this gathering of politicians is just to grab power?
It is just to grab power, the way they did and remove Jonathan from power. Anything that comes out of whatever they are doing today would end up in the same place. Nigeria will be worse off. They will not do better for us.
All right. I mean, the issues of politics will continue to monitor that, but let's look at the state of the nation. Take it back, a movement.
Yes, our movement.
Led a protest when police said, we are celebrating our day. Can you please hold on? It's a way of embarrassing the nation and embarrassing the Nigeria police force. Give us the respect that we deserve to shelve that protest. But they went ahead with the protest.
Have they respected us enough? How do you have a democracy when you cannot speak? And the tool in the hands of people oppressing the people are the police. No, help me. If the protests were to go on, if they had allowed it to go the way it was planned, the march was to the National Assembly, not to the police headquarters. The same day that thing was happening, a day before, you saw protests happening in nearly 1,000 places around America. Did you hear one shot fired? Did you hear any tear gas fired? That is a democracy. But you have a democracy in this country and then you cannot speak.
Is that the situation?
That's the situation. My brother, nothing guarantees my safety after I leave this studio.
You are safe and protected.
No, I know. I'm not afraid. I can't be afraid. But I'm saying that you cannot have a democracy where people should not talk. You write anyhow on Facebook. As I speak to you now, one of our members of the Take It Back movement in Gombe has just been committed to prison because he wrote something against the minority leader in the House of Assembly. Because he wrote something.
That is silencing
That is it. It is all designed to shackle people. So the protest you saw was to say, no, you cannot have a democracy and people cannot talk. That no longer is a democracy. That is totalitarianism.
Well, you know, when police warn about protests, they are always, painting picture of destruction, a picture where it get escalated out.
That's scaremongering, my brother. That's what they do.
So don't you feel that all of that are always valid? Because we look at NSAS protests, you look at the hunger protest that we had last year, and there were a lot of destructions apart during the protests.
The destruction. So, I think let's be honest here. When the protest for last year was going to happen, the movement kept warning anybody, if you will have problem, it will come from your own side. Largely, the events that led to all those escalating situations were the police in those situations provoking the people. Do you get what I mean? Under President Jonathan, not that I like him very much, I was a member of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. Even under that regime, we suffered some oppression. But largely, we suffered it because there was a policeman who was in charge of the FCT at the time who just took it upon himself to cancel out that protest. But we stood our ground. After a while, we had our peace and continued to meet every day until Jonathan was out of office. But when Buhari came, that changed completely. If you go to that place now, they've completely barricaded the place. We are still in a democracy where people cannot talk. You have a law that is making its way in the National Assembly right now, the what do you call it?
Cybercrime Act.
What it means is that if people like you, who is a journalist, don't do something about it, you say certain things on air, they come and pick you and lock you up. That's what it means. And we cannot have a democracy where you do not allow people to speak. People must be allowed to speak. People must be allowed to air their grievances. If they don't feel right about something, they should be allowed to talk.
So what was the essence of that protest? What was the significance of that protest we had a few days ago?
Oh, the chief reason was, look, that bill that is making its way through the National Assembly, throw it away. And the one that is already being used by the police, if you talk anyhow, I mean, this is it. You write something on something. I just gave you a story of one of our people in Ugombe who has just been committed to prison because of something he wrote on Facebook. Now, if I say something against you as a politician, and you feel maligned by a statement I made, either on air or directly or by way of writing, I think the proper thing to do is to approach the courts.
So what normally happens?
They go to the police, and the police will hound you and lock you up. That's what happens today.
Without trial?
No. They will lock you up. They first arrest you. Now, they depend on the police. But the proper thing is to approach your lawyer and say, look, this guy has defamed me. Write to him, which is usually what they do. They give you a pre-action suit, and then they tell you apologize or not, and then you go to court. That is how it happens elsewhere. But in Nigeria here, they use the police to oppress the people. You write anyhow against a pastor, they go and carry you and lock you up. You are struggling to get bail. Before you know, you have spent close to 3 weeks or 1 month in prison. I mean, there was a small girl who was taken from her abode in Lagos and brought to Abuja here. The case is still on. She was in detention for more than 1 month because they say she said something against the president's son. If the president's son feels defamed by something someone said, the proper thing to do is approach your lawyer. My lawyer, write to this person, serve him, and say, look, this thing you said against me is lie. Please, withdraw it or we go to court.
So processes have not really been followed.
They have not been followed. Now, we need to have our police back. The police should be the police for the people, not for the rich, not for the affluent, not for the elites, not for politicians, for Christ's sake. It is completely wrong. We should not have a police that we're afraid of. I was telling someone, I went to somewhere in Europe where this Kalashnikov rifle is made. And I can tell you, for all the time I was there, I didn't see a single Kalashnikov in the hands of any police. What you see is the sidearm, and that person must be an officer, and then whistle, and then baton. But you see police people deployed for routine deployment within the city carrying assault rifle. That in itself is a mistake. We have to have our police back. The
Nigeria is not safe. Well, Nigeria is not safe. So they might say that
even the police. I'm not saying you don't give them assault rifle, but they are tactical units. not routine deployment within town. The person carries an AK-47.
So during those protests,
Yes.
what was the clash between those who were protesting and the police?
The police refused them from proceeding to their destination, which is the National Assembly. In Lagos, they wanted to go to the State House Assembly to say, look, this thing you have doing, you see this cybercrime law, please remove it. People should be free to speak in a democracy, except if the system of government has changed. Then we can understand. If it is a if it's a military dictatorship, we can understand that. Then we will know that when people come out, they are doing it to show force to force with government.
But we are still in democracy now.
We're in a democracy, my brother. That's how democracy works elsewhere. I mean, I was just telling you about the protests that happened in America. Did you hear anybody die? No. Did you hear that the police came and were shooting tear gas? No. The people had grievances, and they came and said, Donald Trump, President Trump, hands off. Hands off what? They are losing jobs, and they are saying, no, we can't keep quiet. Leave this thing alone. This is not democracy anymore. And they did it. Everybody went home. I'm sure he took cue from that thing that happened, and he will adjust.
I mean, because in all of these protests, there are a lot of persons that will be said, look, can we hold a bit and ask, can protests give us what we want in this country? And what number of protests we need to hit on the street for us to get the result? A lot of persons are bothered about that.
That we should not have protests?
What is that? What is I mean, after the protest, what has been the result of this protest that we've had in this country? We've had end SARS protests and bad governance protests, but things are always the same.
Let me tell you something. I'm sure you heard Omoyele Sowore, when he spoke and addressed the press. It says this thing is a series of protests, not just one protest. More will come. The current president in office, I was not too young. I was still, I think, preparing to get in the university when I remember hearing his name and they were protesting against, during the June 12 election, how it was cancelled. President Tinubu was an activist, actively involved to the point where he had to escape this country. Do you get what I mean? Yes. Even under democracy, as governor of Lagos, he protested. When they were going to remove, what do you call that, subsidy, he protested, he was there, right? What it means is that that is a democracy. People should be allowed to vent. Now, venting to destroying property is where you now have to caution. And I'm sure the people doing the protest understand that once you are done with everything, you should still have a country. Do you get what I mean? If I say I want to go to point A, and I know under the law supports me to do the movement from A to B, and you come and form a barricade, I will want to go forward. And then because you have the powers of state, you begin to oppress, and then you shoot tear gas, it turns violent before you know. Did you not see the recent one that happened here in Abuja? I think like 2 weeks ago. I think that also needs to be revisited. When the Shiite people were moving and then they were now, we saw the footage, it was disturbing. And people died on both sides, but that was unnecessary. This country is
management of the protests is becoming a problem in this situation, because as you are aware, they've also cited sometimes their own fear and also a lot of concern. How do we manage all of this to know that in the protests, because in those protests that you mentioned, back then when even President Bola Tinubu was leading protests in this country, there was no issues of violence or it's escalating to the point of...
Maybe the government of the day at that time were more tolerant.
Was the same police that are still today were the same police that were there.
Do you remember under bad governance, the end bad governance protests in Lagos? There are still, the end bad governance protests? Not end bad now, the end SARS protests.
Okay.
We saw people on the other side. There were people on the other side who came and began to disrupt a peaceful protest. We have not heard if they rounded up those things. I'm not sure anybody will just go out to want to protest. Not the party I belong to, not the Take It Back movement. I don't think it is within their space and their thinking to go out and destroy a country they want to see survive.
So we have people always coming out to
counter-protest. People continue to sponsor opposing sides to come. I mean, you saw when there's the lady the senator from Kogi State. I think they mobilized to the National Assembly. Whilst they were there protesting, another group came. there was a protest that I also went for at the National Assembly. There was a law they were trying to pass. The same the senator from Kebbi State was trying to push something through the National Assembly about cyber crime law and all that. We went outside. We protested. We got there. We didn't try to make trouble. We sat at the front of the gate and just had our placard so that when the assembly members were passing, they would say that, look, there are people who do not think this is proper. But you know what? Before we even got our acts together, whilst we were sitting down, we saw another group coming, and they were carrying sticks. It almost became violent. But thank God for reasoning on our side. We kept quiet. Our focus is to ensure that this country moves forward. But there will always be people from the other side who will push people to go and try to cause trouble. It happened in Lagos. It happened here in Abuja. We can't run away from this thing. Nobody, and I'm telling you this, will go out and say this protest must cause trouble. The easy way...
It's always sponsored, or some persons are always pushed to do those things.
The people, the government...
Still living in the same country, still,
exactly.
buying things on the same market. Some people will reason, why would this motive even, be considered in the first place?
It's to protect their people in power. People who feel like if this thing were to continue, it can get out of hand, and then they become less popular, and then the people want them out. It happened in Bangladesh. Do you understand? I can understand their fear. They want to self-preservation, so they send people to disrupt these things. But I am telling you this, the Take It Back movement that I know are a peaceful group. And people who are part of it are reasonable people. What they want is for the betterment of this country. The country has to survive beyond the politicians in power.
All right, let me take you to Rivers State. I may not have listened if your party have spoken on the matter, but a situation where even the people that protested in Rivers State, still from that angle, said, we need government back. A lot of persons have described that this is inviting the military to be part of the democracy that we are running. What is your stand of your party in respect to the state of emergency declaration in Rivers State?
The state of emergency declared in that state was ill thought through. It was poorly thought through. It was completely illegal. We have maintained that as a party. It goes against what our constitution says. The president of the Federal Republic has no powers to suspend an elected government. It has no powers to do that. And Section 305, I think, of the Constitution clearly states where the things that can lead to that. None of that. Not
outrightly saying that you can suspend the governor.
He has no powers to do that. If he has powers to do that, then let us also look at the general public, the general situation in the country. In Plateau, how many people died last week? Over 54 bodies have been picked up. People who just came in the night and murdered them. Would that now be a reason for you to say, okay, let's go and remove the governor of Plateau State? Okay, since we have insecurity everywhere in the country, should we also declare a state of emergency? President Tinubu step aside? The state has put mechanism in place and structures in place to take care of situations like that. If there's a failing, now if they cited insecurity in Rivers State,
they also cited cases where the House of Assembly was not in place. So part of these three arms of government, one of them was actually disbelied at the cost of...
Don't forget, Mr. President declared the state of emergency shortly after the judgment from the Supreme Court.
Okay.
The governor, from what we know, had already begun to align with the judgment of the Supreme Court. And we know that the House of Assembly were also threatening to impeach him. So the implementation of that judgment...
Because there was a political scenario. It's not just about insecurity now. It was a more of a executive war between the executive and the legislature. So the intervention of the president to make this appointment for peace within this period. So you feel that it is not the right step that would have been taken?
I think he should reverse it.
Those people that would have helped the matters at the National Assembly, were you disappointed with the outcome? Because those who would have scuttled that, being that implementation.
We have currently, we're supposed to have 3 branches of government with the same powers.
Okay.
Independent. Currently, what we have in Nigeria, do you think we have a National Assembly that can challenge the president? One of them, now let me cite something. One of their members was on air a few days ago in one of your sister stations, right? Speaking to the fact that loans that were collected under this government have not been properly accounted for. Did you hear it? If that violates sections, specific sections of the Constitution, is it on TV you come and say that? No, you say it in the House. If the part of the punishment will require pushing for impeachment, you push it. But do you think that will work in the National Assembly that you have today?
Do you feel that
first of all, I think that the National Assembly handled it poorly by even going by voice vote to endorse what the president did. That was completely wrong. How do you determine voice vote? How do you use two-thirds to determine voice vote?
But we have a position in the National Assembly that a person will be worried that it's
is
not just APC that is in the National Assembly or the Senate. We have PDP, we have Labour Party, we have NMPP, and all of those persons. So
that is making us question their independence.
Say that the party, I mean, all of them are not a party member to the president.
That is making us question their independence. We expected that the National Assembly, if in other climes, you would expect the PDP factions in National Assembly to walk out of it if they cannot have their way. They just walk out. So take the decision alone. So it tells you that even our National Assembly needs to do some work. We need them to be independent. They cannot be pliable at all times. They have to be seen to be independent to checkmate the excesses of the presidency. But that hasn't happened. People who are more knowledgeable than us in the matters of constitutional law have come out to say that no, you can't use voice vote to support or endorse what President Tinubu did in Rivers State. But that was what they did. Imagine that after the state of emergency and they came and said, look, since you want us to check whether this thing is right or not, every member show up. Show by voting, head count. Do you support? So we know they will call your name and say, look, I support it. I don't support it, not by voice vote. That was a poor way to have handled what they did. And our democracy has been put one step backward. And I'm hoping that before this program ends, we're able to talk about what I expect them to be doing. Because we can't go to 2027 with this whole situation, the way this country is going. No, my brother, we cannot go to 20.
Where are we
I expect that by now we'll be talking about electoral reforms. That on the one hand. I'm sure you saw there was a headline today about my principal, Shawara, saying that if he was president, the first thing he would be discussing as president now is to give our country a brand new constitution. Our constitution in the first place is a problem. We need to get our constitution right. We should be talking about how to reform our electoral process and not talking about what we just see people just running around and doing nonsense. Then we need to tackle security. Security is a problem as we speak. People are dying in their numbers. And I read somewhere where they said the security people in the country have said that violent crime and killing has reduced by 90%. Where are they getting that statistics from? Where are they getting it from? Are we fooling ourselves? We need people who will speak truth to power. The current crop of politicians should be jettisoned.
All right, let's get to what matters and concern Nigerians. I mean, you know, when we have a conversation like this, what matters to Nigerians is about how the country and how all of the policies of government are affecting them directly and indirectly. The issues of cost of living, some persons are still glamoring, are still on the street, that hunger is still persisting in the country. I understand that you are an agriculturist, so you have an idea about what it even means. This government had a projection that all of these things will be addressed for 2025. You know, the determination to get dollar at 1,500, a concern about more food security and cushioning the effect of the hardship already, because we've now lived 2 years of subsidy post-subsidy removal. Some person are now asking questions, where are the savings from the subsidy? And the government will tell you that have increased the allocation that is meant to the state. So we've gone into infrastructural development and all of those, but what Nigerians are now asking is, hunger is still real. Do you feel that there are more, or there are what they are not doing currently to address the issues of hunger in the country?
Do you know the man they call Michael Okpara? There's a university named after that great guy. Michael Okpara was 37 years old when he assumed the governorship of that eastern region. Within 3 years, he turned that entire region around. It was under that same 3 years that they turned the entire place into an agrarian community where they were producing more than enough eggs, to the point where there was now a program where you say 1 child, 1 egg. Under 3 years. It was within the same 3 years. I'm telling you this so you can understand. If we are serious in this country, the 2 years that has passed is enough to begin to change the tide of our agricultural systems. Not just production, the agricultural system in its entirety. That time would have been enough. But we saw what the federal government began to do. You know what they did? We had one planting, I had them, I think the ministry, one of the ministry in charge, they're going to buy 2,000 tractors, or how many tractors? Is that the job of government? Should government be buying tractors? I'm sure you are shocked I'm saying this. All that is to oil some people's destiny in procurement and all that. Let the private sector do it. In places where it has worked and you want it to be sustainable, allow support the private sector to make these services available across the country. Yes, we know these things are very expensive, so there's no need going to buy. You support the private sector, they set up equipment hiring stations across the country. Farmers band themselves together, they access loans, they go use the services of the tractor, because the expenses of buying one is so huge. That's not the job of government. Michael Okpara did that. The Nkalagu Cement, the cement company in Calabar, most of the companies you see around Transamadi were done at that time. On that 3 years, that gentleman was 37 years old. Why is it not happening today? And before we begin to kid ourselves, I know in the US, one of the anchors of that great economy, as it is now, is agriculture. But now tell me, how do you do agric when you still have farmers fighting with headers, or headers grazing into farmlands?
This Ministry of Livestock that was created has not resolved that issue.
I don't. It has not done anything. If it's going to do something, it's not to be preaching Ruga or trying to set up colonies. We should have people. By now, we should have people who are setting up this thing and make it a business. We should not have people grazing across the country. I was a victim of it. I mean, I had a farm here in Buari. One Sunday afternoon, when people had gone, we didn't go to the farm, 2 hectares. This gentleman, I don't know who they were, they brought their cattle and just grazed into the farm and finished it. When I went to the settlement around there to meet the head of the family there, he said, well, they don't know who the people were. That was a big loss. Why are we still talking about that how many years after independence? Now, if you talk, some people will say it is their way of life. Way of life? Mike, 400 years ago, if me and you were living in that time, and there was a meeting called for us to meet in this location, you probably not show up in suit. You show up in, what do you call it, with leaf wrapped around your waist. It was a way of dressing at the time. But if they call you today, will you show up with leaves? Because your forefathers used to do it. No, you come up properly dressed. We have advanced, and so should our system. Our farming system and agricultural system should change. If the plan for setting up the Ministry of Livestock is to continue in the old ways, we will never have peace. But first of all, we need to tackle the issue of security for people to be able to go to the farms. And what that means is that the people doing the herding business should treat it as a business. Get their numbers properly registered, settle down in a location, borrow money from the bank or get grants, set up your business. I mean, one gentleman, I've chatted with him a few times, he's doing it in Adamawa State. Somebody, Yako. I mean, that guy has a complete system around the cattle value chain. Now, the people living around that area do not need to graze their cattle to the south. Because there's someone, there's an off-taker, there's a support system for them to be able to do it. That is what we should have across this country. Otherwise, all these statistics you see, food prices have gone down. I tell you, I don't know where they get all those their statistics from. I have a problem with it. Because the reality on the ground is not completely so. I don't know what they are lying, if they are telling the president lie. But once in a while, the president should just get off from his house and go to Wuse Market, unannounced, and shop. So as to get the feelers of the people whom you preside over, and not be lied to by people who do not mean well for this country.
Because if the prices of petrol, petrol are dropping, some person may having a concern that it will be reflecting even with what we are buying.
Is it? I'm asking you now, is it?
So, who are those to be blamed? If government are saying prices of petrol has reduced.
Reduced to what? I heard that the Dangote
is fluctuating.
But that's only Dangote doing it.
And all
but the price stays there. Should we not buy petrol cheaper? No, answer me now.
With the current...
No, should we not buy petrol cheaper? People who do petrol economies will tell you that it can be cheaper. We are still importing fuel, my brother.
Even with the crude to naira transactions...
We are still importing, and we have 4 solid refineries. I grew up knowing that there was a refinery in this country up until the time when it stopped working, and we began to import fuel. What a country. Imagine that in this country alone, we have close to like 10 refineries working full capacity, and no need to bring fuel from abroad, pay all the charges to get them to the in-country, and our pipelines were working. I don't know if you were born at the time, but we still remember when petroleum products were still passing through the pipeline. Our roads were better, railways were working. When we go to the farm in those days, our farm used to be along the railway track. You see this close to 34, 50, this thing lined up with petroleum product coming from the south and coming in country. Others are coming through the pipeline. So our roads were better. We didn't have to travel on roads. Well, I was alive in this country. I was already born in this country. When you would travel from here to Lagos, you hardly find a pothole. Yes. So there was a country like that. What is stopping us from going back to that? A lot needs to be done. First of all, let us tackle security. Then do our agriculture differently. If we can tackle security, handle our agriculture, people can feed and not be under the kind of pressure they are under. And then they are able to go to the farm, make money and pay their children's school fee, pay their rent, and they are able to do that with support from government. When I say support from government, I'm not saying government taking money and throwing at people. That has been our practice, and it hasn't really helped. But when people complain of hunger, they give you rice.
It's very difficult to make all of those transactions, because even when government have set up different schemes in this country, it unfortunately...
It will continue to fail, my brother. Do you know why?
In the wrong hands.
Do you know why? I've been on your show before. I told you our experience when we went to study the leadership situation in China. In the leadership school for executives that we went to, we saw how China succeeded in addressing the poverty challenge. First of all, you want to address poverty challenge. Where's the data? Who are you addressing? China went into their communities and took comprehensive data. I come from a village. Forget all of us wearing good clothes. We all come from one inside. Once in a while, we find ourselves in the village, and you ask around, because we are beginning to become stakeholders in this country. We ask around, did you get any 5,000 or 10,000? Who is that? So who are you paying the money to? How do you solve poverty challenge without getting your data correct? Do you know why there has been a lot of fraud in that department? Everyone they put there is going to EFCC. Have you not heard? Under Jonathan, the person, they went. Under Buhari, we're still looking for them. Under President Tinubu, one of them came, spent only a few months, was thrown out. That one has not even gone to trial yet. And we will not let that thing rest. But you know the good thing about this country? The tide is changing. People are becoming aware that you can't take people for granted for so long without a pushback. There's a crop of leaders coming who will come into this space and go back in time and audit this space. Whatever has happened. People who look like they're doing behaving like lords now will be brought to book. They will pay. I don't know how long it will take, but they will pay. Our country must be, the leaders must become accountable to the people. And this crop of leaders looking for merger, looking for coalition, you won't hear it from them. They want to be, they want to be politically correct. But we are not afraid to offend them. We are saying that if you ever mistakenly get out of power, be ready to account for your time in office. Whether you were governor 10 years ago or 15 years ago, be ready to account for your president or governor, House of Rep member or whatever. People should be accountable to the people who gave them powers to be their leaders.
Because this government, we said this, we inherited a bad economy. The situations of where we are operating from is we're trying to fix the situation. So just give us some more times to address the issues.
My brother, how do you address an issue? We've been hearing the same thing. 4 years will come and go. It will be the same.
Do you feel there's an action this government for these 2 years has not taken that should reset the country or give us a sense that this is a government that knows what they are doing? Let me just get that your reaction.
Of course. How can you be? The Nigerian army, great guys by the way, extremely well-trained people. They went to Liberia and under a short period, they quelled the civil war. We're not saying bandits operating skeletally. For some of us in the city, or just because you can wear tie in the city, the rural areas are in turmoil. People go to bed afraid. The same Nigerian army went into a country and quelled the war. Democracy is back in that country. It didn't take them 10 years. We're struggling to contain some ragtag army.
It's political.
There's a lot of politics in it. There's a lot of politics. Especially given what is happening in Plateau. There's a lot of politics. I still listened to the National Security Advisor's address. I was completely disappointed. We saw Lagbaja, right? Was that Lagbaja? Yeah. There was another gentleman who is now late, both of them later, Tahiru, the general, that former chief of army staff. Under his watch, do you know what happened? We were beginning to bid bye-bye to all these armed non-state actors disturbing our peace across the country. You saw how that Professor Zulum came out and said that the state of Borno are beginning to lose their space to Boko Haram all over again. There's the new group in Kebbi terrorizing our people there. Lakarawa group. I think the president needs to be decisive. The way he declared the state of emergency in Rivers, he should declare it in security. Anybody who is in charge now who shouldn't be here, fire them straight. And hold the leaders accountable.
So it looks that what is needed is a political will to confront the situation.
Just give them a marching order. There's a footage I watched this morning, very disturbing footage of Lieutenant General Theophilus Danjuma. He was addressing his people. I don't know the event. This was the second time. Do you know what he said? He said he thinks that there's some collusion going on and that the people should defend themselves. This in a country. You are now telling your people to defend themselves. Then there's a problem.
We shouldn't get to that level.
We shouldn't get to that level where you are now telling your people to go and defend yourself. But how do you want to blame them? You sleep and then people will come on bikes and open fire and kill you. So he's saying, defend yourself. In this same democracy that we're in. If the president decides now and say, okay, for the next 6 months, the armed forces go after these guys. And he said it during that broadcast. He said, when they got their training in the army, it was taught them that the best form of defense is attack. You think if the president puts his foot down and says, look, Chief of Army Staff, Chief of Defense Staff, Chief of Naval Air Staff, the Inspector General of Police, I do not want to hear one flying. I don't want to hear pim. You think they won't go out?
The job can be done.
It will be done. I trust them. They will do it. I'm friends with some of them. These guys are extremely well trained. They will do it. But it has become like a business because there are lots of procurement going on. People are making money. That needs to stop. We first have to have a country before we have democracy. And it is the job of these people in power to ensure that our country is preserved. We are losing people in the rural areas. I'm a bit emotional just talking about this. In my state of Benue, Otukpoda used to be peaceful. Now you have these people marauding everywhere. Go to the thief-speaking areas. They ravage all the rural areas. People can't go to the farm. So how do you want to feed your people? By going to import rice from Singapore to feed them, or Malaysia? How do you run a country like that? We need people to begin to ask questions. This is a democracy. Let the right question be done. Let us have a country after this set of people are off the scene. I mean, some people handled it on. I just told you about Michael Okpara. Go and read about that guy. Within 3 years, he turned around the fortune of the entire Southeast. And the Southeast, just to add, it's not just Imo. He extended to present-day Cross River, rivers, everywhere under there were under him. One young man, 37-year-old, turned around that fortune. I am sure that if that system, that experiment, that democratic experiment had been allowed to continue without the 1966 coup, our country will be in a different space.
In all of this,
yes,
it gets broader because Yves said all hands must be on deck for us to resolve this problem. Should our attention just be with the presidency or the federal government? What may be your actions that if it's coming from this angle, where we could just point out to, oh, this state or this region or something is happening differently for a country to get better? Because there are those that will say and hold the opinion that the federal government cannot and may not have the capacity to solve all of the problem, address the hunger issue, unemployment issue that we have in this country, and all of the situation that we have.
I agree, Mike. I agree. I'm not saying the president should do all, but let us also see an example. You rule by example. You lead by example. The man I mentioned, Michael Okpara, I'd like to go back to him, was not the president. Neither was he the regional leader. Was he? He wasn't. But see what he did.
And it's so little space.
It is little space. So we are saying that we should have 37 different individuals in the position of governors also replicate the same thing when the president is saying, this is where we're going. Everybody is putting on hands on deck, and then you're going after insecurity. If you cure insecurity, our people are able to go to the farm. Then our food prices will come down. There will be a surplus. Do you get what I mean? We won't need to be importing. If you don't get the security thing out, everything else you say will be pure rhetorics. Now we have the capacity to be able to do that with a little support from government on all sides. Yes, we have the capacity.
This issue that security is just, it's a duty of the presidency, is in the federal organ. Some states are saying, like some of our state governor has said over time, if I have the capacity, if I have what it takes, I will crush all the bandits, and all of that. Some persons have been bothered. What happens when these state governors or local government chairmen do not have the capacity to do this? Do we fall back to finding local or state policing or community policing? Would we rather not have situation like that of Uromi in Edo State, where some person were coming back from Port Harcourt to Kano State, and then we had such an ugly situation. So how do we manage all of this?
I think we should have state police. We should have it yesterday, not even today.
The state should also have their police.
They should have their police. The campuses should have their police. Local government should have it should step down like that to every community. Do you get what I mean? That's what happens every other place. If this is a democracy, every state is a federating unit. They should have their own police. The situation where the police is centered here somewhere and the governor cannot tell the commissioner of police to do anything, then there's a problem. How do you expect him to police? You call him chief security officer, yet he has no powers to do anything. If he tells the commissioner of police to do something, that one will have to wait for maybe his area commander or somebody in the zone to tell him before they get permission from. No, we should have state police yesterday, 10 years ago. That should happen before.
You're not afraid that it will, some
no, if you regulate it properly, if you regulate it properly, it will not. If you regulate it properly, it will not. We understand that the police, the federal police are beginning to do things that they shouldn't do. But like my principal will always say, it will only take him a few months to correct that. If he sees anything, he calls all of you, the commissioner of police, to Abuja. It is not just going to see the IG. Come and see me. I'm your president. You should be able to see me, Abi. Must you always see the IG? Gather them in a room and say, look, now marching order going forward. IG, if I hear this thing in any state, you go. There are many people who will replace the IG. Keep replacing them, replace the commissioner. Anyone if something happens within your space, you pay for it. And that one self will go back to his station and say, look, Mba, if you go and do anything, you're on your own, I will deal with you. When you do that across board, we will now have everybody who is now responsible for his own space. And first of all, let me say something they would not like to hear. Withdraw all the police guarding all these big men around. So that we can have enough policemen to police our space.
Good enough police, right there.
A lot of them. I even saw them somewhere around.
You don't have one.
Why will I have one?
You don't need security?
I don't. I didn't take anybody's thing. I'm a regular citizen. I believe that everybody,
the country,
because people have said it. You're national secretary. How are you working like this? Did I take anybody's thing? I do my legit business. I do not take people's things. Where people will say, let's go and look for this one. If you come and look for me and you will sit and drink garri. That's how it should be.
But you believe this country should be fixed? And
our country will be fixed, my brother. Maybe not by this group of people, certainly not by these people.
But no, for the sake of Nigerians.
No,
let it be fixed let it be fixed by this government.
God is giving them, God and Nigerian, Mike, is giving them opportunity to do it. If they don't do it, he will do away with them and bring a new crop of leaders. It is only a matter of time.
All right. So you are still standing so strong that you will not match with this
like I have said it, if you want me to reiterate, the coalition you need, a coalition of people who have suffered in the hands of bandits, people who do not have jobs, people who are languishing abroad and cannot come back to their country because it is not any better and they prefer to suffer there. That is a coalition. We need a coalition of the oppressed. And there are millions of us. If they pull us together, we outnumber these people enjoying our money, our commonwealth. Then we can have a country that we are proud of.
Honorable Inakopiago, National Secretary.
You keep calling me honorable. I'm not honorable.
National Secretary of African Action Congress. Thanks so much for joining us on the show tonight and always giving a proper insight to all of this development.
Thank you.
Everyone, that's where we leave it tonight. I mean, a conversation about how Nigeria can move from where we are can never be exhausted. But one thing is very sure, the need for everyone holding any leadership position to do his or her best to getting the country better. Make the change, do the bit you can at the little corner, being a local government chairman, working in the private sector, working in the public service, wherever you find yourself, there's a need to do a bit so that the country can get better and for us to have a better Nigeria. Thanks so much for joining us on the show tonight. My name is Edikan Michael. We do hope to join us again tomorrow as we have another fresh edition of our program. Bye-bye for now.